Teddy, can you sit up, please? Good. Okay. All right, then. Have you got something to say? No. Have you got something to say? Oh, good. Okay. Can you look at the camera and say it? Can you look at the camera, Teddy? Look at the camera.
Teddy.
That's boy over there. Now, can you say hello? You speak? Good boy.
Oh.
That's what we needed. We needed Teddy to say hello. And welcome to Pet Talk. And our guest today is Janet Figg, who is here to tell us all about horses, Teddy. Teddy has met horses. He has met a beautiful horse named Barney. And it was a very nice experience. And it's Mummy's neglect that has stopped him from being able to get to know Barney better. Or I should say Mummy's busyness.
Yes.
Rather than neglect. Well, Janet, welcome. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay.
Now, I understand that you have rescued horses in the past.
Yeah. Well, we've got two rescues at the moment. We didn't actually rescue either of them, but they were rescued. Jem, who is a Welsh Cob Cross, was rescued by World Horse Welfare. She had been starved twice before she was 5 years old, and the second time she was in foal. Sadly, she can't be ridden because her joints don't stand up to work. But we've got her just as a lovely pet. We also have Nosy, who's called Nosy due to a scar across her nose where the halter embedded into her nose down to the bone. She was rescued in Wales by a small charity who were then known as the Society for the Welfare and Protection of Horses and Ponies. They were a very small charity, but they rescued her just before she was a year old. She had this awful, like Mick Jagger lips on her nose where it was so bad, badly infested with lice, underweight. And she'd been being ridden to and from school by kids, tied up to the school railings all day and tethered in a mud paddock that was probably no more than 40 by 60, with 3 others. No access to water. The only water she got to drink was the puddles. But she went to Blue Cross because Blue Cross helped that charity to rehome when they needed help. And that's how we came across her. I wanted something that I could ride, and she's only been ridden for about 6 months so far, and we've had her 3.5 years, I think now. But that's due to me needing a hip replacement, which has now been done. But yeah, they're both such lovely animals.
Whenever I think of 2 things. I think of freedom, because you have those images of horses running. And also I think of them very much as being herd animals, and it always hurts me when I see them in fields all by themselves.
Yes.
So I guess I have so many questions. I'm just trying to work out which one to begin with. And maybe I guess the first one, which is the most important one, is, what does a horse need in order to be happy?
It needs turnout. So there are some that prefer to be in a stable, but for their mental health, I think they need turnout, even if it's half a day each day.
When you say turnout, you mean they need to be allowed
to go out into the field and be horses, eat grass and mooch around, run around if they want to. Ours don't do an awful lot of that. They need to be fed, they need hay, they need to be loved, basically. I think that's probably the most important thing. They need to know that whoever's got them loves them, and you build up such a strong relationship with them. it's incredibly rewarding, especially with a rescue.
There's been sometimes I've read about horses and their ability, almost telepathic ability to connect with humans. What do you think of that idea?
I think they do, definitely. They know when you're off colour. They know when you're not well. When I had my hip done last year, Nosies are very chunky, and a very chunky, hairy cob. She stands about 15 hands. She's not bolshy or pushy or anything, but she doesn't always understand how strong she is. But when I had my hip replacement and I turned up on the yard 2 weeks later on 2 sticks, she was so gentle with me over the stable door. I didn't go in because I didn't want to risk falling over or anything, but so gentle with me. And Jem also seemed, well, Jem and Snowy, who we had at the time, also seemed to know. And if you get particularly children, I think adults as well, but I've only really seen it with children, who maybe have learning difficulties or are quite shy. They go to the horses and they absolutely adore them. We've got a young lad on the yard. I'm not sure how old he is, but he's not horsey, but he absolutely loves Nosy. And he goes to her and cuddles her and she nuzzles him. And he also does the same with Jem, who accepts him. But if the girls try and go to her, because it's women that have badly treated her in the past, she's not quite so receptive. But he can go. They all get jealous of him because this lad goes to her and has cuddles with her. And the girls don't get quite the same reaction.
I was just thinking, because I was going to ask you precisely about that issue, or to do with children with learning disabilities, and indeed adults, and people with all sorts of perhaps emotional issues that seem to find healing through horses. And you're basically saying, yeah, that's I've seen that.
Yes, yeah, and certainly there are a couple of places in the UK that I believe actually have what they class as therapy horses. I work for a mental health charity for ex-servicemen, and I know that a few of them have been to a place, I think it's up in Scotland somewhere, and they just get to know the horses and they bond with them. It helps stop their anger because the time that they're with them is just them and the horse, and it seems to work very, very well.
How did you start to get involved with horses?
That's quite funny. When I was 7 years old, my auntie used to ride, and she paid for me to go for a hack with Orchard Cottage riding stables. It's no longer there, sadly. And there was a lady called Mrs. Taylor who owned it. And I went out on a few hacks on the lead rein at 7 years old. My mum and dad kept it going for about a year, but they had 3 other children, and it's an expensive thing, and they couldn't afford to keep going. So I had a very long break from about 8 years up until just after I got married. We moved to a house in Mitcham, had 2 teenage girls that lived next door who went riding every week. So that started me off again. I want to go riding. And luckily my husband said, yeah, why not? And we were both hooked on it from our first lesson. And it's gone on from there.
What do you think that the benefit is of having a relationship with a horse?
Over this last year with COVID, I think it's what's kept me sane. We only had a time slot that we could go to the yard. The owners of the yard tried to protect everybody. So we had time slots. But I think because I was able to go and spend a couple of hours with them in the morning and then come home and sit at my dining room table and work for the rest of the day, it saved my sanity, definitely. And I think it's probably done that for an awful lot of people.
And in normal times, what is that bond means to you? What does it do for you?
It keeps me, it relaxes me, definitely. Oh, don't know really how to describe it. It means everything that you have that special relationship with them. You know, with Jem, it took her probably 4.5 years to actually trust me. I think I pushed it too fast, if I'm honest, at the beginning. I tried to get too much into her personal space and I had to back off. I learned very quickly I had to back off. She kicked me once, she bit me once, all very close and no damage caused, but it was her way of saying, out of my personal space. And over that 4.5 years, I gave her that space and I just took my time with her. And the reward is just, it melts your heart, quite honestly. To be able to do things with them that you can't do to start with, and to have their trust that they'll come cantering down the field to you, squealing on occasions. It's a very, very special feeling.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't matter what species of animal we engage with, we all recognize what you're saying. You know,
Yes.
I have Teddy, and there is something about a relationship with the species other than our own that is
Yes.
very precious, and the element of trust and that honor to be trusted is huge. You were talking about giving her space, and immediately it made me think about body language. And because with dogs and with cats, there are certain rules about body language. And so I wonder, if someone is approaching a horse, how do we do that? How do we approach a horse without making them feel threatened?
Slowly is the first, the most important thing. If you go rushing in, you're probably going to spook them, and then they're going to be even more wary of you. I tend not to look them in the eye, and I think that's the same with dogs, isn't it? It's confrontational a little bit, and they're likely to move away from you. But it's talk to them quietly. I stroke their necks and then gradually make my way up to the head, and they love to be scratched, rubbed on their foreheads. But it is just really taking your time and being patient with them. And I think as long as you approach, the children tend to sometimes go in a little bit quick, and you just have to say, just do it slowly. And if they go in slowly, then the horse will keep the head there or whatever and be a lot more receptive to them.
Yes, in my experience, they do love having that area of the nose.
Yes, yeah.
And one or two of their noses, they've liked that velvety feel to their noses is something lovely.
Yeah.
If somebody wanted to start to learn and to ride, what would your advice be? Because on the one hand, I can't think of anything lovelier to do. On the other hand, they are enormous, and that's a long way to fall.
You find a good riding school, a very good riding school. If people on Facebook, they're always asking for recommendations, and I always recommend Wildwoods in Walton on the Hill. it's a family run business. They look after their horses really, really well, and they have good teachers there. And you go, it's never cheap. But if you look at the cost, the breakdown of the costs, it's not expensive. But obviously, if you're paying that amount out on a weekly basis, it seems very expensive. But we went to riding schools and had our lessons, and over a period of time, when I had time, we wanted to learn more about them. We wanted to learn how to tack up, how to take the tack off, rugging up, and the general well-being and care of them. So we got to the point where we used to turn up for our lessons early so that we could tack up. And where we went riding at Huntersfield when that was a riding school, and they used to have working pupils there, and the working pupils were great because they'd have to tack the horses up, but because we wanted to, they were able to just stand there and help us and guide us to do it properly. And the same with the rugging up. So we learned the way that the BHS likes things done because they were working pupils and training for their exams. And I like to think I've carried that on.
When you say tacking, what do you mean?
Putting the saddle on and the bridle on. And some horses have to wear boots. I don't recall any having to at the ridings where we learnt to ride. But learning the right way of doing it all, and the right approach and everything.
So what I understand is that if you are looking to learn to ride, is look around and see what school to choose by considering how the horses are looked after.
Yes. You definitely want to go somewhere where they're well cared for.
And then beyond that, what would you say? So number one priority when you're looking for a school would be the care of the horses. Make sure the horses are well cared for. And number two would be?
How friendly it is when you walk on. You want to be relaxed, so you want to be welcomed to somewhere. And I think that's very important as well, because your learning will come on so much faster if you're relaxed.
In fact, I think that if you are in a relaxed environment, it means the horses are going to be more relaxed, which means they're going to be less likely to throw you. So
riding school horses are usually, they obviously have some that are quite cheeky and some that are quite naughty, but a good riding school will also check your level of ability, and they will probably, if you're a complete novice, they'll start you off on the lunge, which is they hold a long rein and stand in the middle and then work you round on a circle, and they can judge you. I think when we started, we had, I don't know how many lessons on the lunge, and then we were let off the lunge, so we rode round on our own once they felt that we were balanced and able to control the horse. But by starting off on the lunge, obviously there's somebody in the middle that knows what they're doing, that has full control, and it's highly unlikely that something will go wrong. As if you've got a good riding school, it won't do anyway.
Exactly. So I think this has been a lovely introduction to what it's like to have a horse in your life, whether you are fully responsible for its care or whether you're visiting in order to learn to ride. So thank you so much, Janet, for speaking to us on Pet Talk today.
That's okay.
And thank you all for watching. Next week, we're going to be looking at separation anxiety once again in dogs. This time, we're speaking to somebody who's written a book about it and who has been studying it from a very scientific perspective. So there's more information to come on that subject. Do join us, do subscribe, and like and share. Until next time, goodbye.